Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya.
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 8, Text 12. I guess I may as well wait for you because you're the only person.
Sure. Okay, I'm ready.
Chatuhu Yuganam Cha Sahasram Apsu
Apsu
Swapan Svaya Udiritaya Svashaktya Kala Akyaya Asadita Karmatantraha Lokan Apitan Dadrishe Swadehe Chaturyuganam cha sahasramapsu Swapan svayodiritaya svashaktya Kalakyaya sadita karma tantro Lokan apitan dadrishe swadehe Chaturyuganam cha sahasramapsu Swapan svayodiritaya svashaktya Kalakyaya sadita karma tantro Lokan apitan dadrishe swadehe Chaturyuganam cha sahasramapsu Swapan svayodiritaya svashaktya Kalakyaya sadita karma tantro Lokan apitan dadrishe swadehe
Chaturyuganam cha sahasramapsu
Chaturyuganam cha sahasramapsu
Swapan svayodiritaya svashaktya
Swapan svayodiritaya svashaktya
Kalakyaya sadita karma tantro
Kalakyaya sadita karma tantro
Lokan apitan dadrishe swadehe
Lokan apitan dadrishe swadehe Chatuhu 4. Yuganam of the millenniums. Cha also. Sahasram 1,000. Apsu in the water. Swapan dreaming in sleep. Svaya with his internal potency. Udiritaya for further development. Svashaktya by his own energy. Kala Akyaya by the name Kala. Asadita being so engaged. Karma Tantraha in the matter of fruitive activities. Lokan the total living entities. Apitan bluish. Dadrishe saw it so. Swadehe in his own body. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Lord lay down for 4,000 yuga cycles in his internal potency, and by his external energy he appeared to be sleeping within the water. When the living entities were coming out for further development of their fruitive activities actuated by the energy called Kala Shakti, he saw his transcendental body as bluish. Purport: in the Vishnu Purana, Kala Shakti is mentioned as a vidya, The symptom of the influence of the Kala Shakti is that one has to work in the material world for fruitive results. The material workers are described in the Bhagavad Gita as mudhas, or foolish. Such foolish living entities are very enthusiastic to work for some temporary benefit within perpetual bondage. One thinks himself very clever throughout his life if he is able to leave behind him a great asset of wealth for his children, and to achieve this temporary benefit, he takes risk of all sinful activities, without knowledge that such activities will keep him perpetually bound by the shackles of material bondage. Due to this polluted mentality and due to material sins, the aggregate combination of living entities appears to be bluish. Such an impetus of activity for fruitive result is made possible by the dictation of the external energy of the Lord Kala. Om Agyana Timarandasa Gananjana Shalakya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Hina Bhutali Swayam Rupakadah Mayam Dadati Swapadandigam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamshcha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamshcha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpite Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhi Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranama Mihare Pre Vanchakapadu Vyashta Kripa Sandhu Bhyevacha Patita Nam Pamni Bhyo Vaishnavi Bhyo Namo Namaha Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtab Tulishmati Bhaktivikasa Swamini Namane Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swamin Itinamane Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarne. So the translation once more. The Lord lay down for 4,000 yuga cycles in his internal potency, and by his external energy he appeared to be sleeping within the water. When the living entities were coming out for further development of their fruitive activities, actuated by the energy called Kala Shakti, he saw his transcendental body as bluish. It's pretty straightforward. So the Lord is laying down here. This is the description of after the partial devastation has taken place at the end of a day of Lord Brahma. And then the creation again is being narrated, in other words. And then we have the prayers by Brahma, how he prays to be able to create as before. He says as before in his prayers, because he was before. He wasn't completely annihilated. He lived the previous day. So presumably every day this happens. He prays to Lord Vishnu for the power to create, as the restore the universe as it was, like that. And so this is being narrated here. So here, specifically, so this is done specifically here by his internal potency. So it's a little technical language, but this is describing how the Lord is lying down on the ocean by his internal potency, enjoying yoga nidra, and appearing to be sleeping within the water, apsu, and the living entities, they begin to come out from him. We were hearing about this a little bit yesterday too. This is all actuated by the Kala Shakti, the potency of time, which is described here. Kalakya is called this potency. Svashaktya is the potency, his own energy, the Lord's own energy enacts this. And the name of this energy is called Kala, or time. So all this is enacted by time. Then, just more points on the verse itself. Our acharyas basically say the same thing, more or less. They just reiterate what's already here, giving explanations of the words. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains it a little bit more. This word, here, if we go here, Udirita, Swaya Udirita, Swashaktya, he explains that although, because here we have the word swapan, he's dreaming. The Lord is dreaming, the Purusha incarnation is dreaming, he's sleeping on the ocean, but nevertheless, Udiritaya, he's awake, he's active. Though he's sleeping, he's simultaneously in a waking state. He's simultaneously awake and he's asleep. Therefore, we were hearing actually a few days ago, or not even that, sometimes you see people, we're hearing here how Mahavishnu, he was sleeping, His eyes are neither open nor are they completely closed. So sometimes we also sleep like that. But you see, when you're falling asleep, your eyes are also sometimes like that. Just like some people fall asleep in Bhagavatam class. They're neither awake nor they're sleeping. So, but Mahavishnu, he can do both. He can simultaneously be awake and he can be sleeping at the same time. And he can be fully immersed in both states. When we're in between states, neither are we here or there. But Mahavishnu, the Lord, he's simultaneously here, there, and in between. He's completely cognizant of what's going on. And at the same time, of course, his sleep isn't like our sleep. He enjoys his internal energy, as is being described here. He enjoys by his internal potency. But he's still dreaming at the same time. So simultaneously, two things are going on. Specifically, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he explains that the sleep of Mahavishnu it goes on by the Chit Shakti of the Lord, his awakened activities. So, Chit means like consciousness, you could say like that. We translate like that. So, generally, sleep is just the opposite of consciousness. It's unconsciousness. But for the Lord, it's not like that. So, those are just some points. So here, the creation, I'll get more into the verse itself, but I just wanted to read one thing because we're dealing with these verses, and I read something in the Bhagavatam not too long ago that was nice. 2:753. This is, I'm not sure who's speaking. I think it's Maharaj Parikshit that's speaking here. So he says, Mayam varnayato moshya ishvarasya numodataha shinvadashradaya nityam mayayatma namohyati. The Lord's activities and association with his different energies should be described, appreciated, and heard in accordance with the teachings of the Supreme Lord. If this is done regularly with devotion and respect, one is sure to get out of the illusory energy of the Lord. The verse itself is very nice. Shunvatam shradaya nityam. If one hears by great faith and nityam always, then mayayatma, the external energy, the atma, is never illusioned by. It's very nice, actually. So by hearing you can take it in two ways. In one sense that we become, for those who are illusioned, they come out of illusion. And also, for those who are out of illusion, they stay out of illusion. They remain out of illusion by hearing about the Lord's creation, etc., like this. The Lord, specifically here, his dealings with the external energy, like that, mayam, the affairs of the external energy. By hearing about Maya, amazingly, but not any sort of mundane Maya, by hearing about that Maya, which is in relation to Krishna, Yoga Maya, of course, Mahamaya is also in relation to Krishna, but specifically his creation are affairs of the internal potency. So by hearing of this, we become safeguarded from being illusioned by that Maya. So, although it's quite technical how the Lord is laying down for 4,000 yuga cycles, and then the jivas are coming out of him, and his body is turning bluish because of the jivas, it's very technical. By such hearing, it frees us from illusion. Literally, it frees us from illusion. We're never bound by illusion. Srila Prabhupada says, in the purport to this, that there's no difference between the pastimes of the Lord, either in Rasa Lila or in creation, maintenance, or destruction of the material world. And he says, for a pure devotee, specifically, there's no difference between the two. So as we advance in devotional service, these topics, they're more, in the beginning stages, it may look like, and definitely it's like that, people are more attracted to the Krishna's Lila in the 10th canto, and other pastimes as well, just like Srila Prabhupada writes elsewhere in the Bhagavatam that generally mundane people or materialists, they're inclined to hear Mahabharata. You see this. Many people, they're well acquainted with the stories of the Mahabharata. Why? Because the Mahabharata is full of mundane affairs. It's full of mundane stories that are specifically written in such a way to attract the minds of materialists, because much of it is not directly in relationship with Krishna. Those topics in relationship with Krishna, so like this, they're very nice to hear about, etc., like this. So there's an external quality to them that's attractive. But for a pure devotee, he's not attracted by the external quality of whatever is going on. Rather, he's attracted by the essence of it, in other words. So he's attracted by Krishna Katha, whether it be this or that. As we advance in devotional service, It becomes like this. We become, whatever topic of Krishna is being narrated, we're attracted by that. Whereas less advanced devotees, they're more concerned with the entertainment value of what's going on. As we advance, it's less about the entertainment and more about the essence. In all regards of devotional service, whether very opulent prasad is cooked or whether very simple khichdi is cooked, for a pure devotee, it doesn't matter. It's all Krishna's prasad. Of course, the taste may be different. There are varieties in devotional service, but the intrinsic quality is the same. He's not disturbed by the external affairs. Yeah. Srila Prabhupada continues in this purport. I was just quoting from this verse here. He says, the descriptions of such activities of the Lord as the Purusha avatars are specifically meant for persons who are in the clutches of the external energy. But whereas by contrast, those in the 10th canto, he describes, are meant for those souls who are liberated from the external energy. So, hearing about these pastimes also helps us, for those of us who are dwelling within the external energy, to come out of that energy and to elevate us to the higher topics. As Srila Prabhupada writes here, he speaks about falsely jumping, etc. like this. Not that higher topics are barred. We're supposed to come to those higher topics, but gradually. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Signs of God, the first 9 cantos prepare the ground for hearing the 10th canto. So the ground is prepared. It's not that the 10th canto is barred. It's not that we don't. Some devotees have a conception like that, a misconception like that we'll never hear the 10th canto. We're supposed to hear the 10th canto, but there's a process to do so. There's a gradual process of purification to do so. And each canto makes this, the summum bonum is specifically isolated by the descriptions in the first 9 cantos. So it's prepared very, very scientifically. So, regarding this verse specifically, more topics on this, means today's verse, how the living entities are coming out from the Lord. Again, so at the end of the, not creation, but at the end of a day of Brahma, the universe is partially destroyed. We've heard about this. And then most living entities are in the spiritual world. But those who are not in the spiritual world, they're in the material world. And then more or less, you could take it like 2/3 of the material world up to like the earthly planets, like that, the middle planetary systems. They're inundated by the waters of devastation. The heavenly planets, they remain. So those pious living entities in the heavenly planets, they remain there, whereas those in the hellish realms and those in the earthly planetary systems, what happens to them? Well, they die, but specifically, they enter into the body of Lord Brahman that's being described, and they remain there for quite some time. And then they come out again. Why do they come out again? The Brahma Samhita, it talks about this. I'll just read the English because I want to read the purport too. Yeah, okay, this is what I want. By conglomerating all those separate entities, he manifested this is the same Purusha incarnation. He manifested the innumerable mundane universes, and himself entered into the innermost recess of every extended conglomerate. Virad Vigraha means like the universal form, more or less. Or the universe, you could take it like that too. At that time, those jivas who had laid dormant during the cataclysm were awakened. So the same thing at that. At the end of the cataclysm, after some time, again the living entities come out. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains, I'll just skip to the relevant part. Those jivas that were merged in Hari at the time of the end of the life of Brahma in the great cataclysm, this is a Mahapralaya that's being described, during the preceding great age of the universe, reappeared in this world in accordance with their former fruitive desires. So this is a little bit different. This is describing at the end of the whole universe, whereas we're hearing about the end of the day. But the same thing is coming out here. That again, the living entities come out. The living entities merge into the Lord, not fully, but sort of enter in within Him. And again, they come out, both in the partial devastation and the Mahapralaya. Again, they come out. Why do they come out? They're within the Lord itself, which is presumably a good situation. You could conceive of it like that. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, because of bhoga adi artham, because for the sake of bhoga, etc., like this, the living entities come out. For the sake of enjoyment, again, they come out. But they don't come out of their own accord. Rather, they have a desire to enjoy bhoga. They have a desire to enjoy. And the Lord, seeing this desire of the living entity, He you could say, ejects or like manifests them from his transcendental body to fulfill the desire of the living entity. It's not that the living entity has any potency of himself, rather the living entity has the material desire, and the Lord fulfills that material desire or gives him facility for fulfilling it, and again lets him enter into the material world, as he says here, in accordance with the former fruitive desires. One interesting point here I was thinking about is that material desire is so strong so that the whole material world can be destroyed, but the thing that is not destroyed of the material world is the living entity's material desires. Those material desires are so strong, they survive the destructive forces of Sankarshan, of the fire spewing out of Sankarshan's mouth at the end of the universe. They remain, and still they're within the living entity, and still when it forces him to become manifest again. Because he can't give it up, again he comes out into the material world like this because the Lord gives him facility. And he's bound by, going back to the verse, Here the word comes, what? Oh, no, this is what I'm reading. 8:12. We have this word karma tantra. Karma tantra. He's bound. Tantra means like string. It means like a lot of things. So he's bound by, here Srila Prabhupada translates fruitive activities. It means like the strings of karma. The living entity is bound by these strings of karma. Elsewhere in the Bhagavatam we have urudhamni badaha. He's fiercely bound by the tight ropes of Maya. So the living entity, he's fiercely bound by the tight ropes of his own karma, principally which is manifesting from these material desires. And it forces him to, as Srila Prabhupada, mainly he's taking his purport in this direction. The living entities are mudhas. Such foolish living entities are very enthusiastic to work for some temporary benefit within perpetual bondage. The living entity is perpetually bound within the strings of karma for what? Enjoyment that doesn't satisfy him. Again, he comes to the material world. He's annihilated. He takes birth again. And this is described later in the same canto, the third canto, Kapila Dev. He narrates more or less very similar things. He doesn't so much get into the creation, but he gets into the movements of the living entity. We have a chapter entitled this. So Kapila Dev, I'll just summarize that. He gives a description of the adverse. So the living entities, they're enjoying their karma, and sometimes they're suffering because of it. They're bound by it. And sometimes this bondage, it results in the form of enjoyment. Sometimes it comes in the form of suffering. Kapila Dev, he gives us later, we'll have many chapters from now, a description of adverse fruitive activities. And in that chapter, there's a brief description of hell, and specifically a description of the living entity, how he's trying to enjoy material life. And at the end of his life, he's dragged away from his body. He's surrounded by his relatives at the end of his life. Here, Srila Prabhupada is writing that aptly, that one thinks himself very clever throughout his life if he is able to leave behind him a great asset of wealth for his children. And to achieve this temporary benefit, he takes the risk of all sinful activities without knowledge that such activities will keep him perpetually bound by the shackles of material bondage. So this is described in that same chapter. It's described how the living entity, for the sake of his own enjoyment ultimately, and for his family maintenance, he takes on engaged in an occupational duty that is sinful. He steals from others to maintain his own family. At the end of his life, or even before his life is over, his family members, they're like jackals that rob him. He provides for them so much, but they don't actually care for him. Rather, they care for their maintenance only. At the end of his life, that living entity's life, he's surrounded on his deathbed by his relatives, and his family members are surrounding him, weeping, superficially so, and he's dragged away by the Yamadutas, the messengers of Yamaraj, and shown that then he's given his stock of karma. This is what you've done in this life, etc., like this. And on the way to meet Yamaraj and Chitragupta, he's tormented with so many different things. He has to walk thousands and thousands of miles without any water. He's dying of thirst. It's very hot. Through very unpalatable environments. In other Puranas, you have I think it's Garuda Purana, the description that comes there, that more detail is given of the horrible things the living entity has to see on this path. So, very unpalatable situation even before getting to hell. The road to hell is just horrible in and of itself. And then he gets to Yamaraj, and then his all that which he has done in his life is listed before him. All of his karma that he has accrued. And unfortunately, most living entities, not most, but especially in this age, in the Kali Yuga, where most people are sinful or degraded by nature, they accumulate sinful reactions, and then they just go down into hell, and they suffer in hellish life, and then they gradually elevate themselves through all the animalistic species of life, and again they come back after millions and millions of births to the human form of life. And then Kapila Dev, he gives a description of what happens then. He enters into the womb of a mother, where he then suffers for many, many months from different things, from the pungent foodstuffs, from the fire of digestion due to the pungent foodstuffs the mother eats. He suffers due to bites of the worms in the womb, etc. like this, and just being cramped within the womb itself. And he prays to the Lord within the heart for release from such a situation. He makes heartfelt prayers unto the Lord that when I become released, I worship you. I've made a grave mistake. I've forgotten you all this time. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he's written nice songs depicting this. And then immediately on leaving the womb, well, first he doesn't want to leave the womb because he can remember the Lord in such a situation. Sometimes, not all the time. The description that's given there in the third canto, that's not, it's not that every single time the living entity is within the womb, he has such a remembrance. Sometimes he's granted such a remembrance. Such a remembrance isn't automatic. It's the mercy of the Lord. We have to remember that. So sometimes he has remembrance, sometimes he doesn't. But even if the Lord gives remembrance, material nature is such that he's forced out of the womb, even though he doesn't want to leave, by the bodily heirs. He's forced out. It's very painful for the living entity. It's very painful for the mother. You can see, if you've ever seen a birth, it's very painful for a mother. You can ask women. Many of them say that the most painful thing they've experienced in their life was birth. It's not uncommon. So if it's painful for the woman, how painful it is for the infant. The woman has the developed body. The infant is just like, you see a baby when it comes out. It's very extremely tender, for any species of life. Some species is like, just like if you see baby cows or baby birds or something like, their skin is a completely different color. Some, you could say infants, I guess you would call it that, their skin is completely red. They're very delicate. And they're being forced through a very small opening. It's very, very painful. Some don't even survive. So, therefore, among with janmamritu jara vyadhi, among with disease, death, old age, which are pretty horrible in and of themselves. Nobody wants to die. Definitely nobody wants to get sick. Some of us are sick right now. We're having sick. It's horrible. And definitely nobody wants to get old, along with the old age. So many unpalatable things come. It's fearful old age, actually. The idea that, my body is going to break down. I can't do all the things I'm doing now. I can't even move in the same way I'm doing now. I can't eat the same things I'm doing. It's a very fearful situation. So many diseases are brought through old age. And among with all these diseases, there's so many things of diseases, so many varieties of diseases. So many varieties of diseases, and it seems like more are coming up by the day. And then death, obviously, doesn't have to be explained. Death, extremely unpalatable, is horrible suffering. And along with these things, birth is equated. So if Shastra is equating birth, Krishna himself is equating birth with these things, birth must be pretty horrible, pretty terrible experience. So the living entity has to undergo these things with a very delicate body. And even after coming out, immediately when he comes out, after going through this horrible pain, immediately he forgets the Lord. His higher knowledge is lost, is described by Kapila Dev. His higher knowledge is lost, and then he becomes illusioned by the affection of his relatives. And then he grows up into boyhood, and in boyhood, he's becomes angry. He starts to, material desires are then awakened, those dormant material desires. They come out in boyhood, and then he wants different things in boyhood, and he can't get them. And because he's frustrated, his material desires are frustrated. You see this all the time in children. They want something, and then they cry because they don't get it. They have some material sometimes it's cute, sometimes it's not cute. But actually what they're experiencing is anger, is genuine, it's a contamination, actually. So, Kapila Dev, he describes the living entity. He's frustrated in the youth. He becomes angry. Then he grows up. He becomes even more angry to the point of becoming envious of other living entities because of lust. Lust develops in the living entity at one point. And then just, everything is downhill from there, basically. He gets then the same thing happens, Kapiladev says. He says, if the living entity doesn't take to means of liberating himself by this bondage, the same thing goes on. Again, he gets a family, he maintains his family, he indulges in more sinful activities, and again he goes to hell, just as before. Kapiladev, he gives us some summation of the same thing. So these are the movements of the living entities, and this is here in the verse today, the further development of their fruitive activities. The further development of the fruitive activities is basically no more than this. The living entity is just going up and down in different species of life, suffering in so many different ways. Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, actually, before I go there, Kapiladev, he has a few nice verses. So the living entities, because they're bound by their material desires. What's the highest material desire? Sex desire due to attachment. Attachment to what? Na tatasya bhaven moho bandhaschanya prasangataha yoshit sangati tapam so yata tatsangi sangataha. The infatuation and bondage which accrue to a man from attachment to any other object is not as complete as that resulting from attachment to a woman or to the fellowship of men who are fond of women. So basically, all of this is going on because the living entity is attached to women. Of course, sometimes the living entity may have a body of a woman, but we've all been so many different forms, either whether it be men or women. The basic principle is attachment to women. For women, attachment to men. Although that's dharmic, that's also there. I won't get into that. But the basic principle of material existence is sex. But the basic principle of sex is attachment to women. So, and it's more binding than any other sense object. It's very relevant here. In this verse, it comes not only once in the Srimad Bhagavatam. This exact same verse is repeated by Lord Krishna. So Kapiladev is speaking this, who is Krishna. And then Krishna himself, he also says this verse to Uddhava in the 11th canto. It's the same verse. This verse comes twice in the Bhagavatam. So the most binding force in the material world is women. But Kapiladev earlier, he says, in different contexts, but I'm going to link it. So attachment to women binds, but prasangam ajaram paasham atmana kavayo viduhu saeva sadhu shukrito moksha dvaram apavritam. Every learned man that knows very well that attachment from the material, which the highest attachment from the material is attachment to women, is the greatest entanglement for the spiritual soul. But that same attachment, when applied to the self-realized devotees, opens the door of liberation. So that same attachment which the living entity reprises in women, which causes his perpetual bondage and birth again and again and again in this material world, if that same attachment is applied to the self-realized devotees of the Lord, then it opens, as it comes here very nicely, moksha dwaram, the door, literally the door of liberation is opened for the living entity. His path back to Godhead is guaranteed by attachment to the pure devotees. Otherwise, again, development of their fruitive activities, and again they go down. Again, they're annihilated. In Gita, Krishna, as he famously says, Srila Prabhupada quotes Bhutva Praliyate, that a few verses around this section, describing the same thing. Here, today, we heard about Chatur Yuganam Cha Sahasranamapsu, and that 4,000 yuga cycles. The same thing is being described in the Gita. Sahasra yuga paryantam ahar yad pramano viduhu ratrim yuga sahasrantam teho ratra vidojanaha. By human calculation, 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day. So the same thing we're hearing about today. In today's verse, Krishna is narrating in the Gita as well in this 8th chapter. And such also is the duration of his night. I'll read this purport. The duration of the material universe is limited. It is manifested in cycles of kalpas. A kalpa is a day of Brahma, and one day of Brahma consists of 1,000 cycles of 4 yugas or ages, Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali. The cycle of Satya is characterized by virtue, wisdom, and religion, there being practically no ignorance and vice, and this yuga lasts 1,728,000 years. In Treta Yuga, vice is introduced, and this yuga lasts 1,296,000 years. Dwapara Yuga, there is an even greater decline in virtue and religion, vice increasing, And this yuga lasts 864,000 years. And finally, in Kali Yuga, the present yuga, there is an abundance of strife, ignorance, irreligion, and vice. True virtue being practically non-existent, and this yuga lasts 432,000 years. In Kali Yuga, vice increases to such a point that at the termination of the yuga, the Supreme Lord himself appears as the Kalki avatar, vanquishes the demon, saves the devotees, and commences another Satya Yuga. Then the process is set rolling again. These 4 yugas, so this is quite a long time, this is millions of years. These 4 yugas comprise 1 day of Brahma, and the same number comprise 1 night. So for all these numbers which you just read taken together comprise 1 day. Then, going on the calculation more, Brahma lives for 100 such years and then dies. These 100 years by Earth calculations total to 311 trillion and 40 billion Earth years. By these calculations, the life of Brahma seems fantastic and interminable, but from the viewpoint of eternity, it is as brief as a lightning flash. In the causal ocean, there are innumerable Brahmas rising and disappearing. Like bubbles in the Atlantic, Brahma and his creation are all part of the material universe, and they are constantly in flux. I'll read this last paragraph too. In the material universe, not even Brahma is free from the process of birth, old age, disease, and death. So if somebody thinks, well, but I can get rid of this by elevating my status of life, as most people do, even karmis think like this, although they're not so intelligent, they think, well, I'm in a horrible situation of life. Let me go up on the social ladder. Those who are more intelligent, they think, well, I'm in the human form of life. Let me go up on the special ladder and let me instead accept the form of a demigod or Indra or Brahma who is over the whole universe. But even when one thinks like this, again, Brahma has to die. Brahma, however, is directly engaged in the service of the Supreme Lord in the management of the universe. Sometimes our Brahma is, generally Brahma, he's over the material world, but sometimes he's a devotee, sometimes he's not. Often, I'll just finish. Elevated sannyasis are promoted to Brahma's particular planet, Brahmaloka, which is the highest planet in the material universe, and which survives all the heavenly planets in the upper strata of the planetary systems we're hearing about now. But in due course, Brahma and all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka are subject to death, according to the law of material nature. So Brahma also has to die, and when Brahma was in the Krishna consciousness in his lifetime, he again has to take birth within this material world. And then he becomes under Brahma. Means like he accepts the form of eventually some animal, some human being, etc. like this. We were all Brahma at one point. Srila Prabhupada describes in the 5th canto, when we entered into this material world. So it's not uncommon that Brahma is not a devotee. It's not uncommon that Brahma becomes bewildered. Even Brahma was bewildered. Kalki Prabhu was describing yesterday. Brahma was bewildered. Many times when Varaha came out of his nostril, he was bewildered by that. Also in the 10th canto, Brahma was personally bewildered by Lord Krishna. Of course, he had the fortune of being bewildered personally by the Lord, by his internal potency. But sometimes Brahma is bewildered by the external potency, which he even works with. This our Brahma, we're hearing these prayers he offers not to be bewildered by the creative potency. I could put that verse up actually. Brahma wants to create again, and there's the 9th canto. And he prays unto the Supreme Lord, please don't let me be illusioned by these creative powers, because he's dealing with a mode of passion, which is very, very dangerous. Lord Brahma, he's the governing deity of the mode of passion. It's a long chapter. Let me just see. I think it comes somewhere between. Anyway, I could summarize it. He prays that because I'm dealing with a mode of passion, please don't let me become overwhelmed by the mode of passion. And similarly, these creative energies are yours. I'm dealing with your energy. So please, don't let me think myself the doer, in other words. Don't let me become illusioned by the misconception of thinking that I am doing this and falsely thinking myself to be the Lord of all I survey. Even this is the basic fault of the living entity in the material world. Even Brahma is subject to this. So Brahma, he prays to the Supreme Lord that please don't let me forget that I'm your servant and that I'm simply acting on your order. Please let me remember the fact that I'm simply your instrument. So anyway, it's there somewhere. I couldn't find it. So even Brahma is praying like this, which is the heart of his prayers, which he offers in the next chapter. So we should similarly pray. Even within devotional service, is important. The idea that, of course, we may not be grossly on the platform of I'm the Lord of all I survey, but we can be thinking that I'm doing this. It's a subtle contamination which even Brahma is subject to follow under. If we're thinking we're entrusted with some service and we're doing some service thinking I've done so nicely, actually it's terrible. It's degrading, actually. The mentality is degrading. Even though the service has been performed, the mentality degrades us. And by such a mentality, it can drag us down in devotional service. Just like Brahma, even though he's engaged in the Lord's service from the beginning, Brahma is empowered by Lord Krishna from the beginning. If he's not empowered by Lord Krishna, he can't create. Empowerment is there, but inevitably, in some course of time, some Brahmas, they're degraded by that same empowerment by the Lord. By that same service they're given, because of a wrong mentality, they glide down in the material world. They're empowered to create, but they begin thinking of themselves the source of their activities. So similarly too, thinking ourselves the source of our activities in devotional service, it can degrade ourselves, being attached to the fruits of our activities, thinking, whatever it may be, thinking I'm cooking so nicely, I'm speaking so nicely, I'm singing so nicely, etc. Like this, it can drag us down in devotional service. Such a mentality, even though it is done on the plea of service, it's anti-devotional actually. It brings us, it cultivates that which is our enemy actually, that which is that enjoyment mentality. So we should be averse to such things. So, anyway, I got sidetracked. I wanted to pull up a Gita verse, actually. I was in the middle of a Gita, but I got sidetracked. But Krishna, so he's describing the same thing. So this Sahasra Yuga I was talking about, then I'll just read the English. At the beginning of Brahma's day, all living entities become manifest from the unmanifest state. And thereafter, when the night falls, they are merged into the unmanifest. Again, the same thing we're hearing about now in this chapter. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all living entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they're helplessly annihilated. Then I'll just read this purport and finish. The less intelligent who try to remain within this material world may be elevated to higher planets, and then again must come down to the planet Earth. So that was the point I was making, that even if we accept a higher form of life, again we come down. During the daytime of Brahma, they can exhibit their activities on higher and lower planets within this material world. But at the coming of Brahma's night, they're all annihilated. In the day, they receive various bodies from material activities, and at night, they no longer have bodies, but remain compact in the body of Vishnu. Then again, they are manifest at the arrival of Brahma's day. Bhutva praliyate. During the day, they become manifest, and at night, they are annihilated again. Ultimately, when Brahma's life is finished, they are all annihilated and remain unmanifest for millions and millions of years. When Brahma is born again in another millennium, they are again manifest. In this way, they're captivated by the spell of the material world. But those intelligent persons who take to Krishna consciousness use the human life to fully in devotional service to the Lord, chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thus, they transfer themselves even in this life to the spiritual planet of Krishna and become eternally blissful there, not being subject to such rebirths. And then Krishna, he goes on, there's a higher world, that is a material world, wherein the living entities are being again repeatedly annihilated and destroyed, pursuing their karma. There's a world that is eternal, the inhabitants are eternal, and I am also eternal. So we should go there. So I'll finish my class there and take any comments or questions anybody has.
It's a very interesting point that you made, how everything in the material world gets destroyed at the time of annihilation, but the material desires, they don't get annihilated, which then causes one to think of the fact that actually the living entity is more powerful than the external energy of the Lord. And that it is by desire that the living entity is conditioned, and it is by the same desire that he can actually achieve love of God. What is that? Sadhya kapunai shavanadi shuddhachite karaye udai. No, that's not the verse. Tatra laulam api mulyam ekalam janma koti shukrte na labhyate. What's the verse? Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitamati kriyatamiti kutopi labhyate. Tatra laulyam api mulyam ekalam janma koti shukrte na labhyate. So that simply by desire or greed, strong desire, and that's another interesting thing about the nature of desire, is that strong desires can defeat weak desires. And actually we have to employ that technique in our own lives. Otherwise there are so many desires that sidetrack us. But by strong desire one can overcome weak desire. And then strong desire, our desire becomes stronger by focus, which then comes the Bhagavad Gita verse of Vyavasayatmika Buddhir Ekeha Kurunandana. And so anyways, it's just some interesting line of thought like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was reading something yesterday. I forget the context of it. Srila Prabhupada was making the purport. Even that's a good point. Controlling lower desires by higher desires. Even karmis do that. You see, they want to get something. It's just like the college students. They want to like party as a lower desire. They want to degrade themselves, but ultimately they want an education. So they suspend their tendency to party sometimes for the sake of pursuing education, for the sake of passing the tests. So even material life is like that. And what was that last point you were making about? I had some point. Oh yeah. The Vyavasayahatmika. So I was reading just yesterday in some purport. Srila Prabhupada was making the point. We hear this often, but he was saying something along the lines of by serving the spiritual master, all material desires are fulfilled. Of course, I guess Guru Varnana also expresses that in like some way, but that at least in that purport is very explicit. And it's interesting how by subduing lower desires, of course not all of them, some are base and like animalistic, but by subduing lower desires and fulfilling the desire of the spiritual master, all other lower desires also become fulfilled. Or if they don't become fulfilled, in the case of like something gross, like the desire to eat like opulent foodstuffs, they go away, in other words. So everything is resolved by that. Yeah. I was thinking of that when you said, yeah. You have more?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if desire naturally becomes stronger when one is focused, but then even to focus one requires some desire. So how does one achieve focus to desire something that one doesn't actually have the desire right now? He wants to desire it, and he's unable to focus because of other desires. But it's by focus only that one can actually become more strong in one's own desire to achieve a particular goal. It's kind of interdependent, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
I see what you mean. One thing is a stereotyped answer, but it's true, it's a fact, is that if you associate those with those specific desire, stereotyped answer is given all this, but you see it. Because one thing, it's not that just because they have the desire, but it gives you something practical. You can see, okay, well, they're pursuing it like that, they're doing it like that, and they're serious about it. And when you see that example, then you become serious about it. You get that focus. It's just like, I don't know, say like, to give them one day. Well, the same thing. It's just like, if you're in a class, you see somebody study like very seriously, even a serious, like by associating with them, one will feel, even when one is not studious or just like a slack student, automatically one will think like, whoa, hey, I'm not doing so good. Because a comparison comes about of one's own position versus the position of somebody else. Naturally, that's natural. So from that, the desire is then like generated. Like that, anything, practically anything like that. If you like, it's just anything in the world is like that. Like that. It's like we have You're cooking something, and then somebody comes in and they cook some like opulent like meal or something, and then they're cooking so nice. I want to become. You see the deficiencies in your own self, how you can improve, and then you see what they're doing, and you can pick up from that like that. So, yeah.
I was reading yesterday and just some things I remember that relate to your class. Lord Brahma, if he attained his post by being a great karmi, then he'll come back to the material world.
Mm-hmm.
If he attained the post of Brahma by being a jnani, then he'll attain impersonal liberation after his life as Brahma. If Brahma is a pure devotee, obviously he'll go back to Godhead. But if Lord Brahma is a devotee, but he has a tendency to think himself independent, or he has a tendency to think himself the doer and the controller, then he'll attain the kingdom of Mahavishnu after his life, and then again be summoned again to be Lord Brahma in another material world.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought that was interesting.
I wonder what that means, kingdom of Mahavishnu.
It says abode of Mahavishnu.
Abode. My understanding, his abode is like it's not really like so much.
I don't know.
Yeah, I assume the abode means, because Mahavishnu's abode is his kingdom.
The Chaturvirha, they have different like residences, like even in the material world.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe that.
Well, Chaturvirha is one thing, Mahavishnu is another one. Mahavishnu, my understanding, I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just wondering what that means.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never really hear others like associating with like Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu's associates, at least in my my understanding, is like Lakshmi, who's serving Shesha, who he's lying on, and then the living entities who's coming in and out. I've never heard of like others like rendering, like just being around because he's like alone there in the ocean. I don't know. That's interesting.
Well, I think he has his kingdom. Mahavishnu has his kingdom, and there's citizens.
We're talking about abode, but there's no description.
Could be. Well, yeah, I don't know.
What does it mean?
Yeah, maybe I'll try to find something. But I thought, anyways, he has a kingdom, so I assume there's citizens of the kingdom.
Where was that from?
But the question is then, where is that kingdom? Where
In
is
the
that
causal
abode
ocean.
of Mahav? Yes, but as far as we know, in the causal ocean, from whatever we've heard, there's Mahavishnu and Ramadevi. That's it.
That's it. Yeah, Shesha is also there. That's it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, 'cause there's a pastime of Arjuna.
That's
When-
true.
when-
Actually, that's
But there's
Kshir
nothing-
Dakashayi Vishnu because he was on the milk ocean.
Huh?
Kshir Dakashayi Vishnu.
That was
Was it that?
No, that was Mahavishnu.
that
was Mahavishnu.
Because he went outside the coverings of the universe.
Oh yeah, that's true. Actually,
No, but at the same time, I don't remember the description as being like having like palaces or gates or other people or anything like that. It just felt like he went out of the universe and then they saw Mahavishnu. That was kind of it.
I'll look into it.
Yeah.
there's that painting there, which was approved by Prabhupada. You know that in the Krishna, it's like Mahavishnu in like some like temple or something like that, and there's like trees and stuff like around him too, in like the background.
It's a kingdom.
So anyway,
I
it
mean,
could be.
There's no description.
Could be, yeah.
It's a painting, but
Could
Pretty
be.
Sure, I need to find something, but I think there's a.
I haven't heard of a description. I wouldn't be surprised if there is, but I haven't heard of it.
Yeah, this is off topic, but now that we're in that pastime of Mahavishnu, I've wondered since reading that pastime. So Arjuna and Krishna, they exit like the material coverings and go to the abode of Mahavishnu.
Yeah.
Is this like proof that Krishna and Arjuna, they're in their spiritual bodies? Because how could they exit the
I think that's
material
actually
coverings?
stated there. Krishna, obviously.
Yeah.
I think that's actually
But
stated.
Is this like some indication that Arjuna as well is in his spiritual body?
I mean, how can you leave the material covering with?
Yeah.
If the living entity is covered by the material body is a material covering that comes from like those elements. So if you leave those elements, how could you have a material body? It doesn't seem to make sense. You can only go there with a spiritual form. That's my understanding, at least.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking. I'm considering. But I'm just thinking because there's that pastime of Durvasa Muni where he went to Vaikuntha, wasn't it? Something like that, the gates of Vaikuntha.
After you've been to
being chased by the Sudarshan Chakra. So
He didn't go to like Vaikuntha. He went to the Vaikuntha planet in this world.
he went to what?
The Vaikuntha planet in this world.
Shwetadvip, okay. Yeah, okay, never mind, that's different then. Yeah, it seems so. I mean, logically, because the material elements come from those things. The material elements are like contained within those things. So it seems like that. I think it's actually mentioned somewhere there too, but my memory may be hazy. But yeah, I would say yes. Anything else? Yeah.
Just a verse in the 11th canto that relates to what you're talking about today. This is Canto 11, Chapter 3, verse 18. Shri Prabhuddha Uvacha Karmanyarambhamananam Dukha Hatyai Sukhaya Cha Pashet Baka Viparyasam Mithuni Charanam Nranam. Accepting the roles of male and female in human society, the conditioned souls unite in sexual relationships. Thus, they constantly make material endeavors to eliminate their unhappiness and ultimately, unlimitedly increase their pleasure. But one should see that they inevitably achieve exactly the opposite result. In other words, their happiness inevitably vanishes, and as they grow older, their material discomfort increases.
Yeah, I roughly remember that verse. That's interesting. They unite for the sake of decreasing pleasure and decreasing the distress, but the exact opposite thing happens. There's another verse in the Bhagavatam that says like that, but that's very explicit. You get the exact opposite of what you want by specifically, I mean, the sexual union and just relationships between men and women in general. People are looking for like pleasure, etc. But often it just gives exactly the opposite. The frustration increases actually. Yeah, thank you. Yes.
You were making this point that in the womb, sometimes they remember their Krishna in the womb. I guess my understanding was, because when I read it, it was like, okay, Krishna will give remembrance to everybody.
It's not always, yeah. Sometimes we think like that. Yeah.
So I guess to clarify that, obviously, if somebody's from a demonic background and they never had any like propensity to try to serve Krishna, then Krishna wouldn't give them remembrance.
Yeah, for them, I mean, what is that? Gosh, I forget. Anyway, I don't know the verse, but in Gita he says, I cast them into demonic species, like kshipami, I throw them into samsara. For those who are like, for those who are envious of me, perpetually I throw them into demoniac wombs, life after life. It's a pretty heavy statement. So Krishna doesn't give remembrance to such people like that. To the innocent he may give like that. But like even then it's not like a stereotype thing. Ultimately it's about like mercy, But you can get the impression after reading the third canto that literally every living entity in the womb has like remembrance of Krishna. But it's not like that.
That's kind of how I read it.
It's not like that, yeah.
Yeah.
So. Mati, anything? No? Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.